Hey guys, welcome back to the homestead and back to the Apocolypse truck. So we're going to go ahead and try to get the steering box changed tonight. We have a used one that we have off another truck that we think is in pretty good shape. This one has probably about a quarter of a turn of play in the steering wheel. And it's got a problem with the drag link. I think they call it the drag link piece that goes on the bottom here. This piece here, the splines are a little worn on something on this one, and this actually has some play between it and the steering box. So we got a new one of these, and we got a used steering box. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pull this out. We'll show you what we're doing here in just a second, but we have the radiator out because it had a leak in it, and as you saw in the previous video, we are converting it back to a regular fan, got a new radiator, and we're waiting on some parts. So now's a great time to get in here and deal with the steering box because there's a whole ton of room right here. Real easy to get at. You know, we're not fighting around radiator shrouds and everything else. So we're going to get you set up somewhere where you can watch what we're trying to do here. And we'll go ahead and peel the steering box out of here, bolt the other one in, show you how to fill the fluid back up, you know, and get it going. Make sure there's no air in it. And hey, when we get a radiator in it, we'll take it for a test drive. So hold on while we get you set up someplace where you can watch what we're doing, and we'll get going on this project. And look, Sue's here to help. So we're going to give you guys to Sue for now, so she can actually point you in the right direction, because this is kind of a deep hole here, and then we'll just see what we can get done. All right, so we're working right down in here, and it's a little hard to see, but what we're going to do is we're going to separate this, I call it a rag joint, from the steering box. And that we need an 11 millimeter 12-point socket. And there's a bolt down in there. And some reason the steering is pointed just the right direction for me on this one. Maybe we're going to separate that. I found a tight bolt on the truck.
First one.
Okay, and we'll pop that right off the steering box. And that may be as far as we go. We'll have to loosen the steering box up. This right here is kind of fixed by a plastic pin. So the way this setup works is if you were in a really bad accident and this frame started crumpling back towards you in the cab, this plastic pin would break, and this piece is supposed to slide up over that piece and let the steering collapse by about 6 inches there, so it doesn't push the steering wheel back through the firewall into you in the seat. So we're not going to be able to compress that without taking the box off. So we'll take the box off and we'll do that, but we've got it moving. So now we need to unhook some lines. And the return line is just a piece of 3/8 line with clamps on it. It doesn't have the pressure on it that the pressure side does. So if you ever need to repair your power steering, one side here will have fittings on it like this, and it just comes apart. The other side, and we've got copious amounts of speedy dry down there from taking the radiator out. So we're going to go ahead and drain the pump at the same time. Put new fluid in it. The other side, however, is pressure. If you have a problem with this side, you do not want to just cut it and put a hose on it, because it will blow it apart. I'm not sure how successful we're going to be getting this apart. This line is pretty tender, as you can see down through here. And it seems to be rusted pretty hard in the fitting. So I'm gonna have to make a judgment call on whether I want to put a new line on it or get torches out and everything and spend time heating this and trying to break that free. So I think we'll move on to the steering, and I'm going to go check in a minute and see how much this line cost and how hard it is to get. So we looked into that line, and it's like 17 bucks, and if we actually get to order it, it'll be here tomorrow from AutoZone. So I think we're just going to go ahead and break this one off because it is pretty rusted, as you see, and we're never going to be any closer. So we're going to go ahead and break that line off, pull the 4 bolts out of the steering box, and get that out of the truck. And we're going to retrieve this because we're going to want to make sure it matches the new line when we get it. And we'll take the other piece off the pump a little later. So if memory serves me correctly, that's a 5/8 bolt, and there's 4 of them. And they all have that spacer on it too. And on these square body Chevys, another common issue was for the frame to crack in behind the steering box. So something you want to look at while you get the steering box off. There is a repair kit you can buy that bolts in. I think there's a weld-in kit as well. Some of these may be easier for me to get from down the bottom. So there's our old steering box, and as I was saying about looking these frames over to make sure they're not cracked, we're going to go ahead and look this one over. This one looks good. You can see the 4 mounting holes right there. No cracks. They usually crack, if I remember right, through one of the mounting holes down and through, and the box flexing. There's a cross member right here that holds this one, but on this end here the frame can flex a little bit, and that will get it to start to crack. We're back. It's been a couple days. We looked at things, we hemmed and hawed, we found the used steering box out of the school bus, and it was pretty old and greasy and nasty and everything. So we ended up finding a remanufactured steering box for a couple $100. So we felt that was cheaper than the aggravation of trying to use the used ones and maybe possibly taking them back out again. We've got our new drag link, whatever you call this thing. It goes on the steering box. This was actually loose on the one that was on the truck before. The splines inside there, I don't know if you can see them. Those splines were worn a little bit, so this had just a little bit of play in it. You remember we broke the power steering line to get it off. There's our $16 power steering line with all new gaskets. And because our return line was just a real short piece with no flare on it, even though there's no real pressure on it, again, AutoZone had this kit for like 15 bucks with all the gaskets and everything, cut to length return line. So we're going to go ahead and put new lines, new steering box, new drag links. So the only thing used on this whole steering system when we're done is going to be the actual pump, which we did end up taking off because it was much easier to get the fitting out of the back of it with it off the truck than it was putting on. So we're going to go ahead and try to get you a little video of us putting this in. The interesting issue here is that, as we showed you coming out, the steering doesn't collapse enough to go on here with this on the truck. So you've got a couple choices. We could go in and we could take the bolts out of the steering column and pull it back, or we can try to sit this into the splines on our way in and then put it up onto the frame and put a bolt in it. So we'll do our best to get you some video of that, but we may just end up bringing you back once we got it, you know, snugged onto the frame and show you putting the rest of it together. So hold on while we get set up. So as I mentioned, we didn't bring you along for mounting the box. The box probably weighs, I'm gonna guess, probably 60 pounds. And I could have taken the tire off and maybe got in there a little easier, but I'm basically holding it at full arms extension while Sue was starting bolts. So there was just nobody else to hold the camera. But you can see we've got it in there. So now we're going ahead and tightening up our 4 bolts. Again, this is much easier without the radiator in here because we're actually able to access it from the top and actually get at all these bolts. These bolts would be not impossible, but a little more miserable from the bottom. So again, this is one of the reasons we decided for the new pump, the new box, was the amount of effort it takes to change it. You know, I look at that and say, well, okay, in the future, if a month from now we decide we want to change it, that couple $100 is money pretty well spent now when we can get right at it. So then what I gotta do is I gotta put the bolt back in the steering shaft right here. It's hard to see on camera, but there's a little collar cut all the way around the shaft, and we have to pull that down so that bolt goes down through that collar, so it can't slip out in the future. And then we'll go ahead and put our power steering pump on and fill it up, and we'll see. I guess we can actually start it and try it before we put the radiator back in. So hang on a minute, I'm going to get this bolt in. We'll bring it back when we're ready to put the power steering pump in. So we've got our power steering pump back in. I've got my little O-ring, and we're going to take the cap off the pressure side of the steering box. And these caps are quite handy. I like to keep things like that. You want to plug something up. So what we're going to do is we're going to put that O-ring on there, like so. And then we're going to kind of figure out how best to get this up through there. I think it came up through here, like so. Adjust a little brake line. And that's a 16 millimeter, I believe. Or is that bigger on that end? Yeah, it's bigger on that end. It must be 18 millimeter. So we're just going to kind of make sure it's not really rubbing on anything serious. Make sure it's staying away from the belt. I'm going to snug that up. Remember, the O-ring does most of the work, so we're just kind of snugging it. You don't have to get like brute force and ignorance on it. So now we're going to take this one out, and this is the low pressure, the return side. And we're going to work on our cut to fit return line. I think Sue has gone ahead and unpackaged that. There should have been maybe a clamp in the bag, I think.
No.
There's no clamp?
I didn't see a clamp.
Okay. So we will have to find a clamp. The good news is I'm pretty sure we have some. And amongst all of the other Apocolypse truck parts that we've collected, hose clamp. And a nut driver is usually your friend on these because it's a lot easier than trying to keep a regular screwdriver in there. But again, we've put our green O-ring in there. We're going to make sure we got the right size wrench before we climb up on our step stool again. And we do. And we're going to go ahead and put this in. And then we have to figure out how we're running this. You can see it has to end up down there. Let's get this piece of it. So we're probably going to end up cutting it right about there. So I think if Sue hands me my pocket knife that I left laying over there. Go ahead and trim that off. Put our clamp on, and we want to look at our clamp too. Like you see, the tightening thing hangs out one end, and we want to be able to get at it easily. So we're probably going to put it that way, like that, and then get our hose up on over the. You can probably not see it on camera, but there's a little flare on the end of the pipe, and it's right where my fingernail is. So we've got about 1 inch of hose up past that, and you want your clamp on the uphill side of that flare, and that way you don't it doesn't slide off over time. It's a common issue you see on transmission cooler lines on automatic transmissions. People will cut the steel line to put a cooler in, and there's no little flare or bell on the end of it, and the over time, the pressure just pushes it right back apart, and they lose all the transmission fluid on the side of the road. So that's it. You can see that really can't get up in there, but we'll go ahead and put a wire tie on that real quick. We're going to fill the pump up full of fluid. And yes, I need to clean the garage. It looks like a Chevy went off. Exploded in here. Kind of did, I guess. So we're just going to do, actually we're going to go right through there like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and get some transmission fluid, and we're going to fill that up. Everything is dry, so we're going to fill it. We're going to start the truck up, and we're going to turn the wheels back and forth. I don't know the absolute proper way to bleed one of these, but you hear some people say go all the way lock to lock. And the good thing is we haven't hooked the steering back up yet, so we're going to be doing this unloaded, so it's going to be a lot easier to turn the wheel. So let me get some fluid, and we'll see if we can get this thing steering. Okay, so that is full to the top in my reservoir, and that was about 1/2 quart of fluid. So we're going to set that aside. We're going to cap that. And I'm going to hook the battery up. We're going to fire this thing up, turn the wheel back and forth a few times. That's because it filled everything up with fluid. And we may have to do this a couple times until we get all the air out of it. So this can only go in one way. There's a handful of splines right here, and it literally is keyed. You cannot go one spline either way the wrong way. And then there's a cut right here in the shaft that this bolt goes through. So you literally take that, you just turn that until it fits. And like I said, it can only go one way. It can go upside down, but so you want this to be kind of level. So you see how this is turned from this? You want to make sure that on this particular model anyways, that's turned level for our tie rod ends, or whatever you call that. I guess that would be the drag link. So now we're going to get in there with our tools and hopefully stay a little bit out of your way. think what we're going to do is see if we can turn that steering wheel that way. Now we can get in there for the impact a lot easier. Alright, so then what we have to do is put this back in. And we're just going to turn our steering back until that lines up. Put our nut back on. Pliers work better, but your finger works in a pinch. So that's pretty much it. We've got our new steering box on, all of our new hoses on. Now we should be able to start it up and actually turn the tires back and forth if we want to, or take it for a ride. Of course, we don't have any radiator in it, so we can't go for a very long ride. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to wrap this up here, and next video you'll see we'll be putting the radiator back in, and then we'll take you for a test drive and we'll see how it goes. After that, I think on this truck, if you follow me, I can show you a good example of some of the issues that we're dealing with. Probably if you look in from over here, you'll see the bolt on the fender is out a 1/2 inch. So everything's loose, all the fender bolts are loose, the inner fender's only half bolted in. So we're probably gonna have to spend some time tightening bolts. We were going to put all new sheet metal on it and probably paint it, but I think probably we're gonna just patch the cab up and run it for a little while like this, because the next project we have is to get the Dodge in. Well, next project is to clean the garage. And then the Dodge is coming in, and the nose is coming off the Dodge, and we're going to go right through that thing. We're going to put injectors, delivery valves, governor springs, probably a new clutch, a bunch of work on the injection pump, just a bunch of work. We're going to get that ready to make a bunch more power and spend some time on the road this winter. So I think that's it for this video. Why don't you guys come on back and watch us put the radiator in, and we'll go for a test drive. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.